if he appoints a prime minister who is then rejected, and then another prime minister who is rejected, then a third prime minister, for instance, who is rejected, then Macron might have to say, well, that's it, I have got to go. In the end, the forces against me are too great. I should go out saying that the system cannot be run properly and that we need to go to elections, which will be anticipated for presidential elections. And that could happen.
Hello and welcome back to Spectator TV. Now, one of the small consolations about being British at the moment, when you look at our political system and the mess that it's in, for a lot of British people anyway, is that things seem to be going equally, if not worse, equally badly, if not worse, in France. And the political system in France seems to be in utter turmoil at the moment, at least as far as the international press is concerned, following the ouster of Francois Bayrou as Prime Minister of France. He lost a confidence vote in the National Assembly yesterday. To discuss this, I'm delighted to be joined by two professors, John Keiger and Robert Toombs. John, I will start with you. La France ungovernable is the sort of headline take for most international media organisations. Is this the case?
Yes, it is at the moment, and it could be for quite some time. But this is nothing really new to France. France has often been through these political crises throughout its long history of political activity. And this one is likely, I imagine, to play out in a way that will be satisfactory to most of the French population. That's to say that for some of them, it's going to be a little bit revolutionary, and for others, it could be a little bit more stable.
And I mean, the sort of natural British reaction is to say, oh, the French, they're always in turmoil. This could be the end of the Fifth Republic. It does seem as though there is some sort of serious dysfunction in French government and the relationship between the president and the parliament. Could you explain that a little for viewers who may not be familiar with how the French government works?
Well, the French, as I mentioned, had a very unstable set of regimes, really, from the French Revolution. Certainly the Third Republic, which went from 1870 to 1940, and then the Fourth Republic, they had governments that changed on average, in the first case, every 9 months, and in the second case, every 6 months. So what happened when Algeria broke out in 1954 and went on until 1958, General de Gaulle comes in and says, this must stop. France needs to be governed properly, seriously. And he set up a constitution, the Fifth Republic, which put in place a number of safeguards to stop this happening in the way it had happened in the past. And those safeguards were basically to give the executive, and in particular the President of the Republic, considerable powers, and at the same time to reduce the powers of the National Assembly, powers that would allow it to overturn governments in particular. And what General de Gaulle wanted to do most of all was to try and imitate, in many ways, the British system of parliamentary government, with an alternation between left and right, and to force the disparate parties in the French system into two left and right blocs. And the Constitution of the Fifth Republic did that to a large extent. But that has been fiddled around with and is now beginning to fall apart. In particular, if I just finish on this bit, the President of the Republic was supposed to be elected for 7 years. That was not to coincide with the legislative elections. After Chirac, that was changed so that both coincided. And now we have a terrible problem of the coordination of the two. And this has brought about a lot of instability that is being played out now.
That's very interesting. Robert, what do you think of that? I mean, that sounds to me like France is trapped in between a sort of American-style secular presidential government and the remnants of an imitation of a British-style parliamentary democracy.
Yes, you know what de Gaulle's supposed to have said about France being ungovernable because it had 500 sorts of cheese or something like that. Um, France is not, and its history it does not show that it falls naturally into a very ordered system of politics, as John was saying. We, of course, have naturally, I think, had a two-party system because it was pretty clear what the two parties represented. One represented basically those who are more or less happy with the existing order, and the other party, whether Liberal or Labour, those who had some desire to alter it. Many French politicians, as John said, wanted France to have something like that, but it never did because it doesn't have a right-wing party and a left-wing party. It has a number of right-wing parties and a number of left-wing parties. And these go back a very long way. And we see them re-emerging to some extent now, especially on the left, which has tried to cobble together a left-wing alliance called the New Popular Front. But the left-wing parties are not the same at all, and they don't like each other. In fact, in many cases, their leaders detest each other. And on the right, too, there has been a long tradition of very different right-wing traditions. Some, like Marine Le Pen, pretty nationalistic, populist, others being much more parliamentary and liberal and centrist. And for these to stick together has been very difficult. And so the French response to this has been to create, or to try to create, some sort of monarchical system. The Fifth Republic is often called a republican monarchy. And it really builds on the sort of tradition of Bonapartism, in which you have a great national leader who represents the national interest, and whereas the parties represent sectional interests or lobbies. And as long as the emperor or the president can plausibly represent the nation, then the system works to some extent. It's often been called a very unstable system, too centralized, too focused on the president, but it was focused on the president. And the problem now, okay, you might say all countries are facing similar sorts of problems, but France's particular version of this is that the presidency under Macron has really stopped working. I don't know what John thinks about this, but Macron himself has, in a sense, caused the system to break down because he's holding on to power supposedly as the national leader, but is very widely detested and has never had more than about a quarter of the popular support, really. And so he is a sort of, in a sense, a kind of void in the middle of the system. Whereas for the system to work, the president has to be able to articulate the national interest. And when Macron tries to do that, at least in his own mind, by, for example, saying that France has to control its debt, people just will not believe it or will not take it seriously. And so you have the problem of the president being unable to find a government that will carry out the policy that he proclaims to be absolutely essential for the country. So France is, I'd like to know what John thinks about whether France is moving towards a two-party system, but two parties which are far more extreme than would be possible in this country, at least as we've seen it in the past.
Well, yes, John, let's hear what you do think about that, and particularly Macron, because I believe this is his sixth prime minister that he's had, and there is this sense in France that he has no grip or purchase on the extremely powerful office that he holds.
Yes, as Robert has already pointed out, in real terms, Macron's people who actually vote for Macron because he is Macron is only around about a quarter of the electorate. It's only about 25%, and it stayed around about that for all of the period. Most of the additional votes that he's always accumulated is because of a reaction against the Front National or the Rassemblement National, the same thing, getting elected. So the sort of Republican sense of duty that a number of French people feel in order to block off the extreme right as they see it is to vote for Macron. So in real terms, he's not a popular president and never has been. And that is beginning to show now. On the question of the could France be moving towards a system of having bipartisan politics, rather in the way of a two-party divide along the lines of what existed in the past in Britain. Perhaps it's changing now, but there are some interesting things that are happening. I'm not sure that it's actually going to fulfill its ambitions, but there is quite a lot of talk now and about the possibility of a union of the French rights. That would mean a union of the Rassemblement National with the Parti Républicain, which admittedly doesn't have many votes at the moment. But what has signaled that possibility or made it possible in the longer term is the fact that Nicolas Sarkozy gave a very interesting interview to the Figaro only about 3 or 4 days ago, in which he, for the first time, stated that the Rassemblement National should be considered as a party like all the others. In other words, it is part of what he called the Republican arc. And the Republican arc would mean, because they are a party that participates in the elections, because they are a party that President Macron consults when he consults all the parties, they should be considered like a party in the Republican tradition. And therefore, they can be united with, or deals can be done with them, which were considered taboo in the past. Deals could now be done with them. So in that sense, the possibility for a union of the rights, which is always the great hope in French right-wing politics, could come to fruition. And on the left, well, things seem to be going in exactly the opposite way. There, the Socialist Party, which is putting itself forward with its leader to be a candidate for Prime Minister at the moment. Last night, I think it was, that Jean-Luc Mélenchon went on the television in his extremely fiery way and suggested no way would the LFI, his France Insoumise party, vote for the socialist leader who, according to Mélenchon, dreams of being prime minister every day. So there was distinct dislike, even old hatred that used to exist between the extreme left and the centre left in French politics before. And that divide seems to be growing.
Robert, what about economics, though? Because you touched on the debt already. And the thing one would think that might stop union de droite, union of the right between les Républicains and Rassemblement National, is that on economics, the centre right has always been fairly fiscally prudent, or tried to be, similar to with what Macron's tried in a way. So the economic centre is extremely unpopular. Right and left, and that might prevent any kind of union of the right succeeding, I'd have thought.
Yes, I think that's a big problem. It's funny that in France, the word liberal has usually been a term of abuse, in the sense that it was usually taken to mean, hard-nosed capitalists who want to grind the faces of the poor and so on. And that's so. If you're looking for a party or for a leader who can propose a policy of public sector restraint, it's very difficult to know where you actually look, at least at one who's credible, because the main right-wing tradition in France under the Fifth Republic, it was basically Gaullist, is also a statist party, and Le Pen's Rassemblement National is a statist party, and none of the parties of the right are adopting a kind of Thatcherite approach and saying, the one who did was Bayrou, the Prime Minister, who's just been kicked out. So to say we're living beyond our means, this can't go on, it's going to be a disaster for the country, this is a message that people, at least at the moment, are simply not willing to hear. There's an old saying about every Frenchman has his heart on the left and his wallet on the right, which meant that many people espoused left-wing rhetoric, but really wanted to keep their money in their pockets. The fact is that now people are not willing to see their own economic interests as they see it, their holidays, their pensions, their salaries, cut back in the name of a national interest, which no politician is being very successful in articulating. They're not trusted enough to be able to say, I speak for the nation. course, this is what the president's supposed to do under the Fifth Republic. That's his job. But Macron is simply incapable of doing it.
But could I just add in something there, Freddie? And that is that the question of debt has been an extremely important lever in French history before, of course. Prior to 1789, the big issue, as Robert will probably tell us in a little bit more detail, was, of course, the question of debt. And so it does ring bells, certain alarm bells in the minds of certain people, but it's certainly not doing that at the moment. And Bayrou tried his hardest yesterday in his sort of summing up speech to try and present the debt as the external enemy, rather like we were in 1940, as though the tanks were rolling across the lawns and everything like that, and that France was going to be defeated by debt. I don't know what Robert thinks about this importance of debt in French history, but I think it's important to remember that it has been significant in France's past before.
Yes. And I'll just add to that, Robert, there's an interesting parallel in Britain with the Conservative Party at the moment, where Kemi Badenoch is trying to position the Tories as the party of fiscal sense, the party you might one day be able to trust on the economy again. And yet the other talk is that Farage might end up re-electing Labour by being a kind of Marine Le Pen type figure who splits the right.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, I think we talk about the Europeanization of our politics, in which we're moving, as it were, in a French direction or a European direction, with our old party system breaking down, and people not being able to articulate a kind of, at least Kemi Badenoch, as you say, but with at the moment a very small proportion of support in the polls, able to articulate let's say a vision, a traditional centre-right vision of fiscal restraint, tax cuts, and so on. And in no country, certainly not in France or in Britain at the moment, is there a strong, at least an organised body of opinion which supports this view. In France, I think not at all. I don't believe in revolutions happening in the 21st century in Western Europe, but 1789 was a debt crisis very similar to this one, in the sense that the government had reached the limit of what it could raise in taxes, and it had also reached the limit of what it could raise in loans. And when you get to that position, something breaks down. What it will be, of course, we don't know. We are probably in pretty uncharted territories in peacetime. In both France and in Britain, in which we have this extraordinary level of debt and of taxation. And people are, of course, as we all know, disillusioned and mistrustful of politicians, but they need politicians who can show them some way forward. And in France at the moment, you don't have that. I'm not sure that we have it yet. We may not get it either. I mean, it may be that we're part of a general Western social and economic crisis in which each country is trying to live in its own particular way.
Well, one possible path for Macron, John, would be a technocratic government outside of the political system. I believe Le Pen's party have said they would reject that idea. We've had enough of technocrats. Technocrats tend to mess things up, etc., etc. But it could be the way Macron will go, which would be an echo of Italian politics before Meloni, which was governments formed just to sort of keep the financial system stable.
Yes, I think there would be a certain amount of opposition to that, certainly from the Rassemblement National. Although, if you take the Italian example, as you just mentioned, after Mario Draghi had been the technician in charge to steady the ship, so to speak, then 18 months later, Giorgia Meloni came to power. So that might be a nice signpost for Marine Le Pen. But I think the options are very, very much open for Macron. And Macron is known for being a little bit of somebody who likes to surprise. And sometimes it's successful, and most times it's a failure. And he's likely to do something like that this time. I mean, he's got a number of options, of course. The first one is, and it sounds like he's going to do this, it sounds like he's going to appoint somebody, a prime minister, in the next few days. He's not going to do it, certainly, I shouldn't think today, and he won't do it tomorrow because of the great big bloquons tout semi-revolt that's going to happen tomorrow when people are asked to withdraw all their money from their bank accounts and to do all sorts of sort of agit-prop actions. So it's going to be later on in the week. But sometimes Macron just hangs on because he gets overtaken by a kind of paralysis, as he did with the appointment of Michel Barnier, where it took 51 days. So the options are that, one, he appoints a prime minister, and he might choose the left, he might choose the centre, and maybe even choose the right so that it could blow itself up. I mean, somebody from the RN. The second option then is to dissolve, and he said he won't dissolve, but Macron has a habit of doing things that he said he wouldn't do before, so that could still happen. And then the third option, of course, is the final one that he may be forced into if he appoints a prime minister who is then rejected, and then another prime minister who is rejected, then a third prime minister, for instance, who is rejected. Then Macron might have to say, well, that's it, I have got to go. In the end, the forces against me are too great. I should go out saying that the system cannot be run properly and that we need to go to elections, which will be anticipated for presidential elections. And that could happen.
And how would that work constitutionally, John? The French system would just, because the president has stood down, there would be an election that year, a presidential election.
Yes, in fact, the constitution is very tight on that. It says that an election has to take place. I think it's within something like 60 days. So there would be very little time for campaigning, and it would all be a massive rush. And the outcome, of course, is likely to be that the Rassemblement National, one of their candidates, whether Marine Le Pen or Jordan Bardella, would be elected. I mean, if there is no serious Republican obstacle put in the way, a united Republican obstacle, which by all accounts, everybody is saying has broken down since 2022 when it worked, and even in 2024 when it worked in the legislative elections. That now, most people are saying, has broken down. And just look at the way that Mélenchon talks about the socialists as social traitors, then we can see that it's probably not going to work.
And Robert, unless I've missed it, Marine Le Pen is still banned, technically speaking, by a court from running for president. I know she's appealing, but the ban, I think, overrules the appeal, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And John will know the date, but her appeal is coming up at a difficult time for her politically, isn't it? So
Yes.
the idea is that she'll be neutralized. But then, of course, there is Bardella, who is extremely popular, and so there's not really an easy way to shut out the Rassemblement National by legal means.
Well, yes, just on that small thing, if I may. Yes, it's been the date of her appeal has now been set. It was set yesterday, funnily enough, when all the turmoil was going on. But it's between the end of January and the begin and February. So that would mean that it would fall right in the middle of the campaigning for the mayoral elections, the municipal elections in March 2026. So the Rassemblement National is happy that it has been brought forward. It is the appeal has been brought forward chronologically so that they can get it out of the way. But the downside is that they now have it right in the middle of campaigning when 11, because it's not just Marine Le Pen, it's people like other senior members of the party are also up there to be judged as well, and they will all be campaigning in various parts of France. So it could have a very bad look for them if they're at the same time popping into court, popping out to do a bit of campaigning and going back into court. So things are not too good.
I mean, I can see that it could be a bad look for them because they're accused of something that is wrong. That actually maybe the court decision was on a technical basis right, but to people who are very angry at the French political system, it looks like the most extraordinary stitch up to have a court blocking the likely winners of an election from running.
Well, of course, it's been tried. It was tried with Trump and didn't work.
Yeah.
And it's been tried in Germany, or it's being tried in Germany, isn't it? I'm not sure. I've followed it exactly, but I think it obviously is an extremely dangerous thing to try to do, because it convinces those, as you were saying, who already feel that the system is stacked against them, that the elite, as it were, is manipulating the system. And of course, we've seen a lot of this kind of language in this country too, that the courts are being used for political purposes. That really does, I think, have dangerous implications for people's confidence in the whole system. And also, I think I don't know what John thinks, but it seems to me that not many people in France, or at least not many supporters of Le Pen, are going to be terribly shocked by the use of European money to fund the party's machine, especially as it's widely believed that this is done pretty generally. So it's hardly going to be an offence that will discredit her in the eyes of her followers. And if she's barred from standing on what would seem to many people to be as you say, a stitch up, it's likely to make the whole thing much worse, it seems to me.
Yes, I mean, if I could just pop in with a little comment, the person that you didn't mention, who also was considered to have been stitched up, was Francois Fillon, who was going to be standing for the presidential elections in 2017 when Macron got elected. I got that right
because his wife, he employed his wife or something. Is that?
Yes,
Yeah.
but he was a Parti Républicain, so a lot of people who supported Fillon, and there were lots, he was extremely popular. Lots of those people are from the Parti Républicain, are still around and think, well, they did it to us. If they do it to Le Pen now, why don't we, we'll just ignore that and we'll vote for Le Pen.
It's absolutely fascinating. John and Robert, thank you very much for coming on Spectator TV. I think we should talk about it again soon.